Greetings, everyone. I'm the Reverend Doug Watkins, and I'm your interim lead minister. I'm happy to greet you all this morning and happy that you're here, whether you are here in the sanctuary or joining us on live stream. We hope that you will feel welcome here. Eliot Unitarian Chapel is a diverse community, but we are bound together in our commitment to live out our mission, which is based in courageous love, growing in spirit, and inspiring compassionate action. Our core values are justice, equity, and compassion. We like to explore diversity well beyond just our theology. We welcome you in the fullness of your age, gender, class, race, sexual orientation, religious background, and spiritual convictions. If you are visiting us for the first time, a special welcome to you. I hope that you will find your time with us both meaningful and nurturing. We invite you, if you are here, if you have not received a guest card, to make sure and get one before you leave. Fill it out, and you can place it in the offering basket or give it to one of the staff or one of our greeters. If you are online, we hope that you will let us know that you're here by sending an email to welcome@eliotchapel.org. There's also an online guest book, and we will be happy to send you some information about our congregation and hope that you can join us soon. So, one of the things I'd like to do today that is a little special is to introduce you to a group of people that I will be working with, and you will too, for this year, our transition team. So, of the members of the transition team that are here, I would like to call forward Susan Van Alstyne, Todd Stark, Katrina Priest, and Jim Lyon. So if you would join me up here, yes. So the transition team is an important part of our interim journey. They were put together by the board, and they assist me in various ways. They assist me by sharing their insight and their knowledge of you, the congregation, their organizational skills, and their willing hands, minds, and hearts through the entire time of the transition, but especially in this first year as I'm getting to know you better. They do various things, and it really varies from congregation to congregation as different things are needed during the transition time. But among other things, they are an assist to me to help me sort of check out some of what I'm learning about you and make sure that it is on track, as well as offering some of their own insight. They are available to you to answer questions, and if they don't know the answer, they can come to me, or also to make sure that you're able to express concerns or things that you're excited about, for that matter. And in various ways, they will help you and me explore fully the next 2 years. And as I said, over time, that will be shaped by what we uncover as we journey together. It isn't a pre-planned thing. It's something that unfolds as we see what it is we need to do. But most of all, I'm really grateful that you all said yes. And so far, they have been exceedingly helpful to me. And will continue to do so. But we will try to put their names and their faces out there often so that you can recognize them as they wander around, and you are welcome to offer some thoughts to them. But most of all, thank you for being a part of the transition team, and I look forward to partnering with you throughout the coming months. Blessings to you all. our opening words and then our chalice sliding. We are keepers of hope, holders of memory, storytellers and song weavers, pulling on this thread of truth, this other march of history that might otherwise fail to find its footing. That life is filled with kindness, bold beauty, courageous compassion, sacrifice for the common good, and a wide willingness to embrace neighbor and stranger as kin. We are here to do the work of hope, remembering the past, remembering ourselves, imagining our future. We belong to each other. Bring all that you are, every shadow and light, every hope and fear to this radiant hour. Come, let us worship together. And our gratitude to Clark for sparking our chalice. I invite you to join us in the opening hymn, rising in the ways that we do, and singing together, "Wake Now My Senses." I invite you to join me now in the covenant that is printed in the order of service as we read in unison. As a free congregation, we promise to one another our mutual trust and support. To create beloved community, we promise to be kinder to each other than we have to be. To listen fully to each other with an open mind and heart, to speak responsibly and respectfully, to find ways to improve our church for all members and parents. Thank you. So it is time for our Time for All Ages. And I'm happy to be sharing the time again, Scott, with you. It's always great. It gives us a chance to sort of work through interesting things during the week and think about what we'll say. So what do we have on tap for today?
Well, we have a story that is based on the work by Jackie Yenga, who is known as the Village Wisdom Messenger and author of the book, The Spirit of the Village. This is a work that combines age-old wisdom and new scientific techniques to help the reader experience a more enhanced life. We're going to explore what many children in Africa learn about life and the values of collaboration, sharing with each other, and looking out for each other's needs.
So one year at a festival of peace in Florianópolis in the south of Brazil, Eliot, who is a philosopher and explorer and a great writer, loved to tell the story of what she calls Ubuntu. And this is a story that was about an anthropologist who had been spending a long time working with a particular tribe in Africa, learning about their customs and and their tradition. There we go. So learning about their customs and their traditions. And so when it came time for him to leave, he had a few minutes before his ride to the airport came around.
So during his time studying the tribe, he had been gathering lots of candy and sweets in the town, and he had always been surrounded by the children in the village. He had an idea for a game. He put all the candy and sweets that he had gathered into this big basket, and he wrapped it with a nice big bow and placed it under a tree. He gathered all the children around, and he explained that they should line up behind this line that he drew on the ground, and when he gave the signal, they should run as fast as they could towards the tree, and whoever got there first would get all the candy and sweets in the basket.
Well, what actually happened is when he said go, the children all turned to each other, grabbed each other's hands, and as a group ran together to the tree and then happily shared all of the candy that was in the basket together. Well, the anthropologist was absolutely flummoxed, and he was like, why did you ruin that game? Why wouldn't you all rush forward? That doesn't make any sense, because one of you could have had all of the candy.
One of the little girls said to him, how can one of us be happy when the rest of us are sad?
He was actually stunned, the anthropologist, when he heard those words, because even though he had worked with this group, this tribe, for a long time, it was only in that moment that he understood something that was absolutely essential to this culture, to this group of people. And it was very consistent with the idea of Ubuntu, that idea that I am because we are. It is an understanding that emphasizes the full humanity of who we are, our deeper connections with each other, caring and sharing, and it is also something that connects us with all that is. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu talked about it in this way.
Africans have a thing called Ubuntu. It's about the essence of being human, and it's part of the gift that Africa will give to the world. It embraces hospitality, caring about others, and being willing to always go the extra mile for the sake of other people. Ubuntu believes that a person is only a person through other people, that my humanity is bound up in yours, and that when I dehumanize another, I dehumanize myself. A solitary human being is a contradiction in terms. Therefore, we seek the work of the common good because your humanity only comes into its own through community and through belonging.
I find myself thinking as we explored this story what it would be like if I more often lived with that sort of mindset, that deep sense of connection. And certainly, especially these days, I can't help but think about what a difference it would make in the world if even a few more of us every day understood that basic truth that this tribe lived out so fully, that these children lived out so fully. And so in our service today, we will explore, as we continue to think about belonging and our last Sunday of that theme, the ways in which that sense of belonging can enlarge the circle of caring and connection, in beyond human beings, even to the planet itself and all creatures on this planet. And so I'm excited about taking this idea and expanding it. So I appreciate the time. What's next for us?
Awesome. So children, we're going to be exploring belonging in RE, which begins in 18 and a half seconds. You may exit out the back. You may.
So as we move towards the high holy days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I'm always grateful for the deep wisdom that tradition offers to us in this time that we do think of as a sort of new beginning as we move into the autumn. And for many of us, there's a new intensity to our lives. For some of us, new school, new experiences, to bring a sense of intention, engagement, a sense of aspiration to this time of newness. And so in our prayer time today, in light of the high holy days, and this idea of atonement, also including the way that we feel deeply connected to all that is sacred in life, will you join me now in a spirit of contemplation and prayer? Beneath the hustle and bustle, beneath the streams of thought that clamor and chatter over the landscape of our interior world, beneath our habits of momentum and stirring, there is a stillness, deep and peaceful, the place where creation begins. Who lives there? We know her by many names: truth, love, God, wisdom. We turn our hearts towards her face, toward the mystery, and bring our prayers of awe, of longing, of hope, of exhaustion. She holds us in our grief and anger, in our disappointment, our loneliness, and our rebirth. From her viewpoint, she sees us, children of the stillness, children of love. She sees our place in the order of things, joined together in the larger story, and she invites us again and again into living, invites us into loving, invites us into being loved. May we each in our own way be restored to wholeness and blessed with peace. May all those whom we encounter receive this blessing through our being in the world. May a more meaningful and lasting sense of connection and belonging connect us to all that is in this sacred season and beyond. We hope and we pray in the name of love. Amen. And blessed be. Remaining seated, will you join me in number 318? We would be one. As we move into our time of receiving our gifts, I invite you to remember that this is our last Sunday as we share the plate with Southside Early Childhood Center. I hope we'll make a special effort this Sunday to give generously so that we continue their important work of helping our children instill within themselves a love of learning and an ongoing life of educating themselves and helping themselves more fully be part of the world in which they grow up in. May a spirit of generosity and love fill us as we now receive and give our offering. As our greeters come forward with our offering, will you join me in dedicating our gifts in the words of dedication printed in the order of service? To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings. Thanks to all of you. Thank you for your generosity. So we'll call our president, Claire Winnikin, forward. And as she's coming up, I will say a little bit about why so many weeks into the time of the interim that we're spending a little time honoring some components of the transition time. One of the things that we learned about interim ministry is that the first part of the interim ministry, it's important for there to be a time of getting to know each other and establishing sort of a core relationship. Often because the time feels so short. In the old days, we'd come romping in and start doing stuff right away, and we're shocked when it sort of fell flat. That's because the work that we're doing is important and sometimes hard, and it requires a certain level of trust and knowledge of each other. So it's not like we've had tons of time to do that, but we've had some time to get to know each other. And so we'll take just a moment to honor the importance of this connection over the next 2 years and to understand how mutual that work is between all of us. And so, Claire, I'm grateful for you to join us to represent the congregation and the board.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Reverend Doug, we've asked you to journey with us during this time of transition in the life of our congregation. We welcome you to our community. We are grateful that you have chosen to be with us because we understand that the interim time can be both challenging and joyful. Will you now take up the mantle of transitional ministry with the members of Eliot Chapel? Will you teach us to the best of your ability about the interim tasks that we must do to prepare ourselves for the next chapter?
I will.
I ask you, members of Eliot Unitarian Chapel, will you support Reverend Doug as he works with us, bringing us his knowledge, his skill, and care? Will you allow our interim minister to take risks, to make mistakes, and to ask for help when needed? And will you open your heart, mind, and hands to this ministry, embracing it with honesty coupled with kindness? We know that the interim ministry we know that the nature of interim ministry is such that you will eventually leave us. And these objects represent the important work of our journey with you, the exploration and drawing from the past, represented by the photo album. The honest reflection of who we are, which is now symbolized by the mirror. The willingness to shine the light of curiosity and clarity into murky places.
We'll have to imagine the last two. They're not in here.
And a compass that reminds us to seek direction using our guiding values and our mission. We hope you will keep these in your office so that we can be reminded of these important things and this covenant. And at the end of your interim ministry with us, we know you will take these objects with you as a symbol of your journey to the next congregation.
There are words in just a moment I'll invite you to join me in saying, but I'm excited as we continue our interim journey together. These symbols will remind all of us of our work as we journey together in this time of transition, guided by our principles, our covenant, and the interim tasks. Now will you join me in the words that are printed in your order of service as together we say, welcome to the journey, now we begin. Thanks to you. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, thank you. Beautiful music. Perfect lead-in for this message. So often in congregations, moments that really stand out in my mind happen in unexpected ways. Many years ago, as I was ending a service, I suddenly realized that one of the things that we were going to do at the end of the service is say goodbye to a member of the congregation. And in an absolute happenstance way, I also realized that the closing hymn that we had chosen, Come Sing a Song With Me, happened to be his favorite hymn. So I just pointed it out as we were about to sing that it was a lovely coincidence that this song was what we would sing our goodbye to him with. The thing is that Frank had been a part of the congregation long before I got there, and this was when I was a settled minister. It was a long ministry. And he was in his mid-90s at that point and had always been very recognizable in the congregation. He was always dressed to the nines, incredibly warm and gentle and outgoing and full of energy, quite the consummate poet. And he had formerly been a conservative minister, and life had really turned things upside down for him. And he found a home in the Unitarian Universalist tradition. So as we got ready to sing, I couldn't help but feel a little extra sadness in this goodbye. For one thing, just losing someone as wonderful as Frank from our presence felt especially like a loss for me. But in addition, I think many people in the congregation knew that he was leaving in part because he felt like he had to, that as he had gotten into his mid-90s, the ability to live alone had become more and more difficult. And his kids lived halfway across the United States and finally begged him to come and move closer to them so that they could try to help in any way that they could. But the thing is that Frank really didn't want to go. And so we began to sing, Come Sing a Song With Me. And as in one of the various iterations of the verses, we got to the part of the chorus that goes, and I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. When we got to that section, two young women that were sitting all the way across the congregation just moved over next to where Frank was in his wheelchair in the handicap section. And they just knelt next to him and both put their arms around him. And as we continued to sing, they reached up for the people behind them with their free hand. And those people took their hand as they were singing and just sort of naturally then reached to the person next to them. And as I was standing there and we were singing, I watched as one by one, with no instruction, the congregation began to link arms or reach out to the person in front of them, so that as we finished that last verse, it was like this chain that I would have only seen, say, in ordinations where we do a laying on of hands. The entire congregation, stranger and friend alike, had linked with the people around them. And all of those hands linked to people in front of them as it moved to Frank himself, and as many people as could just gently placed their hands on him. And needless to say, that was a big sob fest in that congregation as we finished that hymn. And probably that was the hardest benediction I ever had to give in my life. And somehow I croaked through it. And the thing is that all these years later, in a split second, it can come back to my mind as something that happens rarely, but a true and unbidden sense of deep belonging and connection. And there are many layers to that truth. The thing is that Frank, long before that day, had worked very hard to be someone who created that space of sanctuary for other people. He, I think, had learned through the difficult experiences and the incredibly hostile response he received from what had been a loving congregation when he left their midst as their minister, how important it was to welcome people. And he had offered classes that helped people find their own poetic voice. And just in general, he really worked hard to let you know that you mattered and that he saw you. And so in some ways, before this ever began, he set the space for that belonging. And before that day, one of the young women had come years before when she was married to a man, and in the process of being in the congregation, the two of them realized that their marriage needed to end because she realized that she was a lesbian. And the congregation did a very intentional job of embracing both of them in that very difficult choice, not taking sides and supporting them through an important time in their transition. And I don't know really what her friendship with Frank was like, but she knew how important it was for there to be a sense of healing and connection. The way that we draw the circle wider is something that can happen seemingly by happenstance, but it is almost always predicated by some heartfelt work, some willingness to pay attention to each other, to offer the gift that you were given of welcome and of being seen and of being embraced. And the more that that happens, the more that when we are able to, we let ourselves know that work matters when we come here or wherever we are, the more likely that we are changing the world in ways that we can't imagine. There is always this expanding circle, and the way that we participate in that expansion, in that drawing wider, makes a huge difference in the kind of world that we live in. And for that matter, it makes a difference in the kind of world that we experience in our lives. John O'Donohue wrote, "There is a lovely balance at the heart of our nature. Each of us is utterly unique, and yet we live in the most intimate kinship with everyone and everything else. Its more profound intention is the awakening of the great belonging, which embraces everything. Our hunger to belong is the desire to awaken this hidden affinity. We know that we are not outsiders cut off from everything, but rather participants in the heart of creation." In this last Sunday, when I'm helping you think about what it means to participate in the heart of creation, I want to take this idea and really push it to a pretty far edge. And the reason I do that is that I believe that it is always important when we practice this sense of belonging to everything, of understanding our relationship. It changes our understanding of our day-to-day lives. But it especially comes into play and can make all the difference in very difficult times in our lives, when we suffer great loss or feel very afraid and alone and overwhelmed. And so for just a moment, I want to look at what it is like when that place is true and what it means to belong to everything in all of its complications. Recently, I found myself thinking about a story that I was very taken with many, many years ago that was first a book and then turned into a documentary called Touching the Void. And it is a mountaineering movie, which is not the usual kind of film that I watch at all, but it's based on a true story of two climbers who were friends, Joe Simpson and Simon Yates, buddies who attempted a very dangerous climb in the Peruvian Andes. And in a moment, and they'd actually never tried this climb before, and it was rather infamously hard. But they were young, 21 and 25, and felt sort of invincible. And so they set out to do this climb over about 3 days and had enough provisions for that time. And on the first day, things kind of went very badly, let's say. And at one particular moment, by accident, a misstep on a sort of icy patch, Joe slid and fell quite a long way and happened to fall in such a way that he broke his leg quite badly. So badly that he could barely even put any weight on it at all. So there they were up in the Peruvian Andes, and they were already tethered together trying to figure out what to do. And so that night, this major freezing snowstorm hit, and yet they felt like they could not make a snow cave and sort of wait it out. They had to get back as quickly as possible. And so Simon was helping to lower Joe while he was attached very slowly. But they didn't even know where they were at this point. They just knew the general direction. And he didn't know that he had lowered him over this actually very high precipice. And so he was just dangling with a broken leg about 300 feet above anything else and could do nothing. And everything was howling. There was no way for Simon to pull him back up. And there was no way for them to communicate with each other because as the snow began to sort of dissolve underneath Simon, he felt like if he had moved at all, he would slide way down the side of the mountain, not knowing what in the world was going on for Joe. And about 12 hours later, when there had been no sort of way, I mean, at that point, because of how the rope was hanging, they couldn't even use something to sort of, between the two of them, communicate through the rope. Simon didn't know what to do. And what he did is now infamous and must have been incredibly hard. He assumed at that point that Joe was probably dead, and he cut the rope. And actually, Joe was very clear that he probably would have had to do the same thing, because there was no way that anyone could have survived unless that happened. But when he cut the rope, of course, Joe fell 300 feet into a major crevasse with a broken leg and survived it. And so, touching the void, to me, was what happened for both of them from that point on. That Simon had his own void, where he had done something that felt like a horrible thing to do, but the best choice he knew how to make. And the entire way as he made his way down, he just, every part of him struggled with what had happened. And of course, Joe had this incredibly complex thing. He had survived it, but he was down in this crevasse, and all he could imagine that he could do is lower himself even deeper and hope that at the bottom of the crevasse he could get out. And he did, but day after day, for 5 days more, he would drag himself through the snow because he couldn't stand. They had run out of all food, all fuel. They couldn't even really melt snow anymore. It had to be about the most incredibly grim moment for both of them. Eventually, Simon made his way back to camp and waited to see, hope beyond hope, if there was some chance that Joe would show up. And Joe slowly made his way. But the thing is, something began to change in him. One night, as he was feeling especially overwhelmed, he found himself just laying out in the open snow, but not wanting to fall asleep because he knew it was too cold and he probably wouldn't wake up. And he looked up at the stars, and he felt the stones under the snow behind him. And suddenly in that moment, he felt deeply connected with them. He knew how old the stars and the stones were, and yet some part of him was part of that greatness. Not in a way that was entirely comforting, but deeply connected. And he realized that the only reason that he was continuing to go on, because he did not think he was going to survive this, was because he did not want to die alone. And so he made his way inch by inch and found himself slowly, more and more of him, more and more of the things that he understood about himself to begin to inch away as he felt he was closer and closer to death. Until finally, one night, perhaps the worst possible sets of things, he got out of the snow and had to make his way across the rocks. And as he was making his way, suddenly there was this terrible smell in the air, and he realized that he had just crawled through the latrine area of the campsite and now was covered in excrement. So there he was with a broken leg after several days, emaciated. He had lost a third of his body weight, covered in human excrement. And he realized that that meant when he went through that latrine area that he was close to the campsite. And in that moment, every bit of will that he had actually melted away. It was like he had been holding so strongly, so closely, so powerfully to this deep sense of drive that when he knew he was that close and he was so afraid that perhaps no one was in the camp anymore, he just let it all go. And the thing is, at that moment, with life being about as low as possible, he also realized that he was as close to the powerful span of human existence as he had ever been. That when we are at that place of our deepest vulnerability and deepest brokenness, there is nothing that holds us apart from the deep connection with everything that is, with everyone who has ever been. And he realized in that moment, even though he didn't believe that he would live to see anyone ever again, that he deeply wanted to. But even if that didn't happen, he still had lived powerfully, deeply, with a sense of belonging. And so, kind of without hope, he began to call, and his campmates were still there, but were getting ready to leave the next morning, and went out into the snow and found him. The thing is, when we think about belonging, I think we often think about it as very warm and touchy and feely, and I understand why. But belonging is also the way in which when we are at our worst, at our saddest, our most alone, when we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and feel like there is no one in the world but us, at those moments, we are actually present to thousands of people around the world who are at their lowest point, who are awake in the middle of the night, who are feeling deeply lonely. That deep vulnerability is one of the most powerful places of belonging. And in those moments, we are truly not alone. So as we think about what it means to belong, let's push a little more into the depth of what it actually means. That sense in which we recognize what is always true, but especially when we need it most. We don't have to do anything to belong. That comes with the ticket that we get when we are born. What we must do is more and more remove the things that stop us from knowing fully how deeply connected we are. That idea of Ubuntu, that there is no way that we exist without the existence of all that is. The more that we're vulnerable enough to really live into that, the more likely that we are to live more fully, to make a difference in the world, to feel more at home in our own skin. David White puts it this way. Your great mistake is to act in the drama as if you are alone. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely you, even at times, have felt the grand array, the swelling presence, the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom, that the stairs are mentors of things to come. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation of life. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The perfect timing, exactly. Everything is waiting for you. Will you stand and join me in hymn number 1064, Blue Boat Home? Now, as we prepare to leave this place, though we extinguish this chalice, we do not extinguish the light of wisdom. We do not extinguish the deep caring and connection of human love and community. We do not extinguish the light that carries us forward to our true convictions. These remain in our lives until we gather again. I invite you to receive one more gift of music before we leave this space together.